Konnichiwa.
Howdy, y'all.
I'm Leslie.
I'm Laurie. Welcome to
Sumo Kaboom, where we talk about all things sumo.
That's right. We've got some news. We've got some poetry. But the bulk of our episode is going to an interview today about a new sumo book that's out and available with David Rios. We'll talk to you more about that in a second. But first, we've got some other things to mention.
That's right.
We have a raffle going on. You can always join our raffle for the next week or so. We are drawing for 2 prize packages on Halloween. It's a whole bunch of sumo merch. It's super fun. You can join by getting a raffle ticket at our Ko-Fi account.
Yeah.
Ko-Fi.
Just search Sumo Kaboom.
Yeah, on Ko-Fi, and you'll find it.
ko-fi.com.
That's right.
Or you can always go into any of our links on our social media bios, and our link tree has the link to coffee there. So
Yeah.
Ko-Fi.
Yeah, it's just super fun way to join us for a fun raffle.
Yeah, and this has all been hand-selected by us in Japan. Well, not all of it, but some of it has been collected over the past few years. And we find that we just enjoy spreading that wealth to other people. So we have a lovely collection, which includes, I think, an Endo Tagada and other choice items. So we're going to be doing 2 drawings, and we will send these prizes anywhere all over the world. I think we originally said, America, North America, and then we were just like, we can't do that. We can't do that to people. So we'll ship it wherever. So $3 a ticket, and you know where to find sumokaboom.com, and you'll probably be led in just by looking somewhere. I'm rambling, but you can find it. You can find the link.
How about some poetry?
Let's do. All right. This is from one of our listeners, Gil. And let's just start here with one called Takakeisho. Now, I have been absolutely loving the despondent photos of poor Takakeisho lately. Like, his eyes are like, please come help me, come rescue me. I'm in people clothes. I don't know how I ended up in this time warp where I'm like modern day, but I don't belong here. And I've been feeling hardcore for sweet Takakeisho in his retirement phase. Hopefully we'll see some smiles, but maybe if he's listening now, this will give him a little perk. Takakeisho. Thunder rumbling, or the echo of Shiko. The end came too soon. Oh, that was
Lovely
nice.
haikus.
Lovely haiku.
Yep.
Thank you, Gil. That was number 1.
Yep, there's more coming.
Okay.
More wonderfully sad haikus coming from Gil. This next one made me really sad.
Terenafuji. White rope belted king, standing alone at the top on breaking branches.
I'm not laughing, and yet I am. That's such a great haiku. Oh, and so sad.
Considering, I will give you a little info on some of the news this week, even though this is not really the news section. But yeah, he's been diagnosed with diabetes again and osteoarthritis in both knees. Also not news to us. What's funny to me is that the news was like, he's been given 1 week off. And I was
Because it'll fix it all.
Right. 1 week of healing for diabetes.
Yeah.
And osteoarthritis in both knees. It's gonna be 1 week, and then he'll be back out on the tour. But poor guy.
Poor guy's like living the life of an 80-year-old
Yes.
for about a week, and then he'll return
just
to
be
his
fine.
25-year-old self. I don't remember how old he is right now. I think he's in his 30s.
Yeah, I think he's like,
Yeah, so then he'll
30
just
something.
be a top-tier athlete yet once again. But enjoy your week off,
Right.
Terenafuji, for those maladies.
And our last one from Gil. Tochin Ocean. Stronger than the tides. Mountains are pushed. Trees will fall. Jealous, Hercules?
Now talk about someone who seems to be doing quite well and enjoying his retirement. Tochin Ocean.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he looks like he's just imbibing so much red wine.
New
and
wife,
just-
new life,
Yeah.
new kid,
New kid.
begin again.
Yep. He seems to be having a great time.
I feel like there's some hubbub about him and his personal life, and
that just comes from us.
I know. Well,
so let's just leave him to a good retirement.
I know. We did hear through the grapevine that like the whole surprise about his new wife and new child was like a surprise to everyone. Like that was one thing that we did learn. We can't tell you who the source is, but we definitely learned that there was like a little bit of like, oh, this is new. And nobody got any heads up about the fact that he got remarried and has a new kid.
One thing we do know is sumo gossip, y'all. There are many things that we get mixed up about, but sumo gossip, we are on point.
Yes. I mean, we're not like close in the circle, but I feel like we're okay to spread a little gossip all over the airwaves. Anyway, so that was some love for Tochinoshin, who we don't hear too much about these days, other than he's on social media and doing great.
Gil also straightened us out about something else.
Yes.
Let's call this section Oops, We Did It Again.
We did it again. Great. Because we have made... I always giggle, by the way, when people go and they're like, I started at your episode 1 and been catching up. And I'm like, oh no.
What did we say back then?
Oh, dear God. What did we say? And there were, I'm sure, millions of mistakes. It's okay,
we're human. We try our best.
That's true.
We always
and we've
try
always
our
tried
best
to cite our sources, whether they're wrong or right. And we've also been like translating through Google, like for 4 years solid.
Well, and sometimes we're just not specific enough about terms that we're using.
Yeah, and then sometimes it ends up being a mistake because we edit out something in the edit that
makes
it sound different than what we actually said. So in that way, we're always perfect.
According to Leslie, we are always perfect.
Always perfect.
But Gil did point this out.
Yes. He said osteoarthritis is caused by mechanical wear and tear on joints, often seen in athletes. I have this too. Whereas arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease where the body's own immune system attacks the body's joints. Sounds much worse, if you ask me. And I agree, Gil, because he has some experience with osteoarthritis. So
he was just pointing out to us that we shouldn't just...
Arthritis is not arthritis, like we think
There
of
are different kinds of arthritis, and these athletes probably have a certain kind of arthritis, which is osteoarthritis. Right.
Which is
a lot of athletes get that. Yeah. And that's what he was pointing out to us. So thank you for reminding us, we probably should be more on point with the terms that we're using. I am going to talk about another oops. This one was pointed out by the wonderful John Trail, who we still need to get on this podcast. We need an interview from him.
Yes, we do.
So John Trail is the vice president of the International Sumo Federation, who took enough time out of his day.
To listen to our inaccurate podcast?
Well, he is a listener, which I absolutely love.
That's so sweet.
And I love all of the work that he does. He's an amazing resource. And I often... will listen to other interviews with him, to get my information straight. But he needed to tell me that I was inaccurate about something, and I'm really glad he did. He said, hey, I love your podcast. Sorry to correct you, which is always such a lovely, friendly way to say, oops, you did it again.
Yeah.
And he says, Ishiura's father... Okay, so this is about our Sweet Totori High reporting.
Right.
Okay, about Ishiura's father.
Okay.
Which... I just want to say that at the outset, real easy when you're doing research, real easy to make mistakes. Like if different people have had the same post and the same job, super easy to get them confused.
Okay.
Like we did the episode on Arashio, the third.
Yes.
Real easy to find your way down a hole and not realize that
there's Arashio 5, 6,
that
7.
you're suddenly looking at Arashio 5 and shoot, when did that happen?
Right.
When did I get off the third? Anyway. That's not an excuse. Here we go. Ishiura's father, he says, is definitely not from Mongolia. You have jumbled him up with my good mate. And John, tell me how to say this aloud. The next time you send an email, say, hey, this is how you say this Mongolian name. Gantugs Rentsendorj. He is the main Mongolian connection as coach at Totori Johoku, so Sweet Totori High.
Okay.
He was incredible on the doyo and super tough for his size. He won the Sumo World Championships in 2012 against a slap-happy Bulgarian despite his neck injury. I love catching up with him after tournaments as he is always up for my mischief. And here is a photo of us in Russia after too many vodka laybacks.
Hilarious.
Anyway, so he's friends with this guy from Mongolia who is the main Mongolian connection at Sweet Totori High.
Okay.
So Ishior's father...
He's there, but not Mongolian.
Right. He's there. He's been a coach.
Okay, so he's there. Okay.
He was a coach at some point in the past and now is the principal, as I understand. Okay. But I just wanted to put that out there in case anyone else was like, wait, what?
I know. We may have to go put this a disclaimer at the beginning.
Oh, I will.
One day.
No, well, I will go back to that episode and put a disclaimer in the description that says, hey, by the way, this is incorrect. And so sorry about that.
I'm sure
everyone's
dad's listening.
Well,
like,
I just always love it when someone's really nice. They reach out and they're like, hey, y'all almost got it, but not quite. Like, I don't mind when people do that, and especially when they're as friendly as John Trail.
Yeah. Well, I got another oops, I did it again real quick.
Oh, no. Yeah?
Well, no. It wasn't anything bad. I just think I said offhandedly last episode when we were talking about the Jungyos, and I reached out to John Gunning and say, hey, thank you so much for that article because it was really helpful for us. And he was like, yeah. The Jungyos aren't after every tournament, just 4 times a year. I was like, oh, yeah. I think I knew that, but like I just said after every time. But like, yeah, there's only 4 a year, which is good to be reminded. It's not every single time, but still, it's a crazy amount of jungyoing.
Jungyoing? The verb jungyoing?
I think I just made that up. I
love that people are listening, and I love that people keep that in the back of their mind to correct us at some point in the future.
Next week's episode is all the mistakes we've ever made over the past 3.5, 4 years. Thank you for everybody else who gave us some grace, though. I was like, you know what? They'll get it in time.
And eventually they'll figure that out.
They will learn how to pronounce this name. Are you ready for our one tidbit of newsflash?
Yeah.
Newsflash. Like I said, the Yokozuna is out for the last bit of the tour because his knees are bum and his diabetes is acting up.
Because he doesn't have that chef, does he?
He doesn't have the chef.
He needs a personal chef. If they all had
a personal chef, then everything would be a lot easier. Onomatopoeia, also known as Onosato, but my computer thinks his name is Onomatopoeia. Onosato also left the tour because he has a good old bout of some, not like norovirus or something like that, but he has nasal abnormalities.
So do I. That is, I've never heard a more accurate description of my life.
He's had a fever, though, which is a little bit elevated than yours. And so he was removed from the tour and also given time off to recuperate at his home sweet home, Nishonoseki stable. So it's unclear if he'll return to the tour, but I imagine he will probably be back once that cold takes its course. But I will say thank you to all of our listeners who have been sending us video from the tour. It is cute as always. The guys wrestling children, and also in one of the cities they were wrestling like big kids, like teenagers and stuff. Mm-hmm. And there was like a teenager who was taller than like Hoshoryu, I think. He was like a big kid. So I kind of actually worried because Onosato, like all the Ozekis were wrestling against these younger kids, but they were big kids. And I was like, y'all don't hurt. Y'all please don't hurt these guys. And they would put an act into it. But, you always see the guys wrestle with little kids. So it was kind of fun to see them entertain and put a little bit more muscle into it when they were, having kind of practice bouts with some kids that might just be one-day professional wrestlers. Like this is exactly the path that these kids take. When the tour comes through, they get a chance to put on their mawashi and kind of go head-to-head against an Ozeki, which is amazing, right? Wouldn't that be an experience, is to like actually try to hit as hard as you could, like up against Onosato or Hoshoryu? So that was kind of fun. And then because next week will be our very spooky sumo storytime episode, just want to remind everyone, again, get those raffle tickets bought. You will have until Halloween. We will be doing the drawing on Halloween in costume, and we will put it up on our social media so you can see it's legit. And we're very excited for that. So just one last reminder of that. We have the Consulates Cup that is coming up this next weekend, I believe, down in Dripping Springs. at
Outside of Austin.
Outside of Austin.
Dreamland.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's a really cool venue. So if you happen to be in the area and you want to go see some sumo or you're curious, you will see a lot of the the wrestlers that wrestle all over the U.S. in amateur sumo or, non-professional sumo. They're just trying to get some reps in. And you'll also get to see some very beginning people just try their very first tournament out. And so we went down the very first year, and it's just like a really cool place to meet other sumo fans and to give support to those that continue to do the sport and are just also trying to get started. So buy your tickets for that. I'm sure you can Google Dark Circle Sumo and you will find all their information on Facebook. You can find all of that information about the Consulates Cup there as well.
You could also watch the live stream. If you go to the YouTube page of Dark Circle Sumo, they also, I believe, are on Twitch as well. You can watch them live. Jake from Grand Sumo Breakdown is going to be there online telling the world what's happening. And Jake is amazing.
He's so good.
Yeah, he's so good at what he does. So even if you can't make it in person, you could always watch online. Justin Kazart is the person behind Dark Circle Sumo. We have talked to him before, but I'm also mentioning him because sometimes when people run into Justin, amazing things happen. And that is the case of this person that I'm about to introduce you to, David Rios, who's a photographer. And I think I want to call him a documentarian. I don't know if he calls himself that. We'll find out. But he is someone that ran into Justin at Texas Sake, another amazing place down in Austin if you like your sake.
Yeah, they also support a lot of the sumo events and
they
always
do
give a lot of love.
A chance encounter with Justin there at Texas Sake reignited David's passion for sumo. And it has since resulted in a pretty fabulous book that we're going to talk about, The Way of Sumo, The American Warrior's Journey.
David Rios is from Donna, Texas, located in the lower Rio Grande Valley. An avid photographer since childhood, he traveled the world after college and found himself living in Japan, where he fell in love with traditional Japanese culture, including sumo wrestling. He currently splits his time between Austin and Honolulu and is always searching for his next photographic and international adventures.
So this is cool. Yeah, all about American sumo wrestlers, people who are trying to keep the love of sumo alive. I'll let him explain.
My name is David Rios. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a software engineer, and by day, and then I guess by night and whenever else, weekends and stuff, I'm a photographer. I have lived in Japan before. I spent a few years there and actually got to see a sumo tournament. That's where my journey started. But from there until now, it's been quite an interesting journey in the world of sumo. So.
Great. Tell everybody about what inspired you to do this book, The Way of Sumo.
Yeah, so it started, a friend of mine when I lived in Japan, he called me up and said he wanted to go to I was living in Nagoya at the time, and he wanted to go to the summer basho, and I was like, well, I'd never seen sumo. I said, sure. And so we went, and I thought it was the most amazing thing. I was like, wow, I'm not really into sports, but I thought this sumo stuff is pretty cool. And I left Japan shortly after that to do a master's in the U.S. I wound up working in a different state. And then I wound up back in Austin, and I met Justin Kizart the second night I was in Austin. I went down to Texas Sake, and I'm sitting at the bar talking to a couple guys, and they're just patrons, and sumo was on a big TV, and we were talking. I mentioned the tournament, and we were talking about that. And Justin says, I'm a sumo wrestler. I'm like, what? This guy's a sumo wrestler, and of course he is, Yeah. And got to know him and found out he was just starting a sumo team. And so I helped him actually find his first place to practice.
Really?
Yeah. I was doing Aikido at the time, and we had a couple of nights free at our dojo. And so he used our dojo for a while. And then he started inviting me to tournaments, and it just kind of took off from there. And I was taking photos. I was shooting on film and just having a good time, and had this new friend, and, doing this cool kind of Japanese thing, you know, because I'd lived in Japan and I really was very interested in sumo. And then I went to Salt Lake a couple of years ago and met John Jacks there. And we had pizza and beer afterwards. And he started, you know, I guess I had been looking for the story. You know, what's the story behind sumo? What is this story that I'm kind of stumbling into or finding my way into? And he talked about how sumo had been sort of a transformational thing in the lives of a lot of guys in Hawaii. And so I was like, wow. And we talked about that. And I realized that was the story I wanted to tell. That was the story I had been looking for. So we agreed I'd come down to Hawaii and shoot some photos. So I did that in July of 2022. And I did the interviews that went into the book. And
there are 4.
Yes.
Like yes?
Yes, there are 4 interviews.
And why don't you go ahead and tell people who you interviewed and maybe why?
Yeah, so the 4 wrestlers. So John Jacks, of course, you know, kind of a seminal figure in what sumo in the United States looks like today, right? He was involved from the 70s up until now. And he had been invited by Takamiyama to go train in Japan so he could come back and be a trainer in Hawaii to elevate the level of training in Hawaii. And so, you know, obviously a pretty important figure. Wayne Vieira, a professional sumo wrestler, one of John Jacks's students, he's now a pastor. So also a pretty critical figure. Also, Tyler Hopkins, Tsunahama was his fighting name, and he was over there at the same time as Wayne was. And then, of course, Sione Pulotu, who also trained under John Jacks. He only did amateur, but, you know, through his interview, I learned that, you know, it's funny, all these guys, I interviewed them separately. They weren't in each other's interviews, weren't listening. And they all talked about the same stuff. And so there was a certain transmission of some of those critical parts of Japanese culture and sumodo that they all received. And so they were all pretty good guys to interview. You know, they had very sort of different stories, but in the end, they kind of told the same story, you know, in a way without intending to. So, yeah.
Yeah, and because you're a photographer through the sumo, but why don't you talk to me about what you were trying to capture?
So it's like I started, like I said earlier, you know, I started just sort of taking pictures for fun, and I didn't know what I was pulling together. And as I learned through the interviews, you know, there's been this whole very long history of sumo in the United States for about 100 years, you know, and it is only recently sort of taken root on the mainland, right? And it's really taking off compared to, you know, I think it's been in California for a number of decades, but outside of that in Hawaii, it's really been not so big here in the US, but it's really taking off. And so one of the things in my mind was I wanted to capture this. You know, we're kind of at a seminal moment in the mainland in terms of sumo and how it's growing. And I did want to capture the people, those faces, and those individuals that are in the ground, on the ground floor of building sumo here in the United States, on the mainland specifically.
Oh, nice.
And so that's how the photos came about. You know, then the interviews came later, and then, you know, those two started to come together into this text and this story.
Yeah, I really appreciate in your photos how you've really captured the scrappy nature of it all.
Yes.
So much of the sumo that's being practiced in the U.S. is done in backyards or in parks and in borrowed gym rooms. And it's really, people really are building it up from next to nothing. And they're doing it just because they're passionate about it. And you've really captured that so well in your photos.
Yeah. I understand there's a wrestler, I think her name's Helen, out somewhere on the East Coast who, you know, practices by herself. And I'm like, wow, you know, that's dedication. I don't think I could do that,
right?
You know? And so this is important to people. And the people that have found sumo, I think, are drawn to it specifically as opposed to other sports. They've picked this for some reason. It speaks to them, and probably each of them has a different story, you know. Yeah, I had originally intended to interview quite a larger number of people and maybe travel around the U.S. You know, life got in the way. And so at some point, you know, I took the photos I had and the content, and I said, you know, let's go ahead and get it done. You know, so many people start projects and they never finish because they keep, well, just, you know, one more set of photos but I think the ones that I did capture really do tell that story regardless.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You've captured some big players in the U.S. sumo world, the international sumo world. And, you know, these athletes some of them are traveling hours and hours to practice with other people.
Yes.
They're self-supported athletes, so they're paying to go to foreign countries, to go to some of these sumo meets. They're traveling all over the U.S. to do this simply because of the love of it. So what are some of the events that you travel to that are involved in this photo book? And are you going to the Consulate Cup coming up this weekend in Austin? Will there be more photos coming?
Yeah. So the first tournaments I attended were the WINS tournaments, the women's tournaments that, you know, that was the first tournament I found out about. So I was like, well, I'll go to that. And I didn't know there were women in sumo. And everyone that I speak to, you know, that I tell about the book, you know, who don't know anything about sumo, they're like, what? There are women in sumo? And it's like, yeah. And so those are the tournaments I started with. There was the Consulates Cup. I went to 2 of those or 3 of those, 2 of those. And then some of the ones in San Antonio that took place there. I went there and captured quite a number of shots from those. And so yeah. And then, you know, I had the opportunity to go to nationals a couple of years ago in Salt Lake, and that was a treat. You know, there was just some incredible photos that came out of that.
Yeah.
I thought those were really good. By then I was shooting on digital, and some other photographer that John had hired, you know, I shoot mostly on film, so I was still learning about digital, and he kind of helped me figure out the camera. And so thanks to him, I got some really great shots. Yeah. So yeah.
Nice. So how can people get your book?
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon. Basically, the materials I chose are the highest level, so it's a hardcover book. It's the same quality as, you know, a college textbook. You know, it's got a really nice cover, and it's got the archival quality paper. So it's a really nice book. It's intended to be sort of a coffee table book, you know, something you could have to show people when they come into your home or just to enjoy throughout the years. So it's available on Amazon now.
Nice. And so if someone out there is a sumo wrestler and they think, or they're wondering, oh, I wonder if I'm in any of these photos.
Right.
Can they go check them out? How many photos can they see on Amazon, do you think?
Chances are, if you were in the Consulates Cup or Nationals, anything to 2021, 2020, and 2022, you're probably in the book. There are quite a number of folks in there.
Okay.
And so if not, your friends will probably be in there. and so it's kind of a neat thing to have.
Yeah. Do you think in the future you will do a paperback version or a digital version?
I've considered that. I don't know that it would be that much work to convert the transcript to digital or to like a ebook format or a paperback. I don't think it would be. So I might do that sometime. What I liked about this one and why I chose the higher end format was, once again, it would be sort of a nice thing to have on a coffee table, and it would hold up, you know, which hardbacks tend to do. So
yeah. Are you a sumo wrestler?
I'm not a sumo wrestler. No.
Because you said you had some martial arts in your background, so it just made me wonder.
No. I did Aikido. I did Taekwondo years ago, a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu. This was back in college. Up to recently, I was doing Aikido, and right now I'm actually pretty involved in Tai Chi.
Nice.
And so I like that a lot. Yeah.
Nice.
So.
Me too. It's easier on the joints.
It is. It sure is. Yeah.
But that's okay. We could still be fans of sumo.
That's right.
Thank God other people are doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a website or a way for people to follow you?
That's a great question. Strangely enough, I don't have social media, and I don't have a website. I just have the book. So, anyone that wanted to reach out can, my email address is contactdavidrios@yahoo.com. Nice and simple. It's supposed to be easy to remember, but no one remembers. So I'll say it again, contactdavidrios@yahoo.com. And I'm happy to correspond with anybody who reaches out or has questions or, whatever. So
maybe spell Rios.
Rios is Rios.
There we go.
Yeah, David Rios.
Okay,
so,
at yahoo.com. Okay, that's great. And is there anything else we missed that you would like to talk about here?
So I'll say to the end of finding the book on Amazon, it's the title is The Way of Sumo. If they type in The Way of Sumo and David Rios, the book will come up. It's immediately. So so it'll be pretty easy to find. I think the book comes at, sort of an interesting time, as does this story. The thrust of the book is sort of this transmission of very specific aspects of Japanese culture to American culture. Mm-hmm. Having done martial arts here in the United States, I've never done any martial arts abroad. It's sort of this interesting journey that we take, those of us who are doing Japanese martial arts in the United States, or any kind of Asian martial art, in that usually we're studying with Americans, and they may or may not have had an opportunity to learn some of these other aspects of the culture. And so I think we're in an interesting time as sumo grows here to decide, how do we, there's so many moving parts to, the way of sumo, or any Japanese martial art. I think I talked about in the introduction, how do we hold our Western culture in one hand and these other aspects of Japanese culture in the other, and pull those together, to maintain, in the book I talk about that senpai-kohai relationship that came out in the interviews. Mm-hmm. And, the power of it to transform how we relate to other people, how we relate to each other, and really how we relate to ourselves, each of us, and how well does that play out in our martial art, whatever it is, whether it's sumo or karate or, it could be aikido, whatever that is, and how it plays out in the rest of our lives, whether it's, in a classroom, in a workplace, in our families. And I think, to me, that's the part of sumo, of aikido, of taekwondo, of all these things that we don't always get in the United States. And so I think the book offers sort of a starting place for that conversation for each of us, with ourselves and with the people we practice with, and to sort of explore and see how does that, how am I going to allow that to inform sort of my daily life and how I live. And so it's kind of an interesting, intriguing thread, so to speak. So I hope that people who pick up this book will take the opportunity to kind of think about that and delve into that and explore that. And I hope the book can be sort of an impetus for that for each reader.
That's really beautiful, especially now in this time of our election. Everybody's starting to go to the polls to vote. And, people listen to this all over the world. But in America, we're in a very deeply divided political environment right now.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And, when I read the intro to this book, it really helped me to remember that, studying something like sumo really teaches people how to respect someone that you consider your opponent, right? Mm-hmm. To respect a different view and to build a community and to transform things into peace and connection and to contribution. And I really appreciated that part of this book. I appreciated that was in there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I'm glad you saw that. From my own time living in Japan, I was last time I was in Hawaii, it was 4 or 5 months ago. I was talking to Wayne, and we were having this conversation. And I'm not a sumo wrestler, but I lived in Japan, and I tell people it's a very difficult culture to connect with. A lot of us get interested in, anime or manga or some other aspect of Japanese culture, and all that's great. And then when you get over there and you're living there, it's sort of a very different experience, and you're really struggling to find your place there and to understand how to navigate. And you want to do things your way. And at some point, there's this moment of surrender. And you realize, okay, I'm going to be here. I'm living here. I'm, trying to find my place. I'm going to have to give up how I do things, at least on some level. Mm-hmm. I think the reality is you're never going to give up. If you're from the Western world, whatever your country is or your culture, you're never going to give that up 100%. But it's like I said earlier, you have to hold, your culture, whatever it is, in one hand, and hold this Japanese way in the other hand, and you find this place with which you can kind of integrate both in such a way that you can be you, and at the same time you can take this wonderful part of Japanese culture and integrate it and let it inform how you interact with other people. In the United States, we love to give our opinions, and, somebody says, oh, that restaurant, that food is so spicy. And we're like, that's not spicy, But in Japan, you don't say that, you just don't give your opinions. You allow room for everyone's opinion in a way. Mm-hmm. And you hold space for that. And it took me, probably a year and a half before I stopped giving my opinion on everything. You really do start thinking about the group, and you start thinking about how what you do is going to impact other people. Now that can go awry too, so you can take that too far as well. But in the United States, I think to myself often, how, some of these aspects of Japanese culture where we really do consider, where you're asked to consider the larger group. You're asked to consider how you're impacting others. Could we use a little bit more of that? How could we incorporate some of that? Mm-hmm. I think, there's some real value there for all of us as individuals and as a community, as a nation, as a people, to do that. And, sumo has all of that baked into it. It comes with that because it comes from Japan, which has all that sort of mindset and that culture, I think a lot of times here we teach sports like, it's this physical activity and we're going to go win and, it's going to be great and all that's good. And that's part of it, of course, but in Japan, when martial arts are taught the right way, which I don't know that they always are, but, when it's done the right way, they're really looking at the whole individual. They're looking at, your physical, your mental, your spiritual aspects. And it's really about, like I say, it goes back to, what's your relationship with yourself? What's your relationship with the people around you? What are you going to contribute? It's I think that's a daily walk. And, all of this is baked right into sumo. It's baked right into there. So, yeah.
Beautiful. I do believe that when you travel is a wonderful thing, and it shows you immediately just how American you are as soon as you go into another country.
Sure.
Even, like, this is a ridiculous example, but when I was over there, I became aware, or I noticed how, when I was traveling through all the transportation systems, I was not as aware of my surroundings as everyone else in Japan. Everyone there knew exactly what everyone around them was doing and what they needed. And I was completely unaware of pretty much almost everybody around me. It's like I knew where I was, I knew what I needed to do, but I took up way more space and was way less aware of the people near me than anyone in Japan was. And that really stuck out to me as a traveler. I thought, wow, I didn't realize I was so concerned. I don't know about concerned, but I just have a highly individualized point of view that I didn't even realize I had until I got into another environment and thought, wow, these people are way more aware of everyone else's needs around them than I've ever been. It really does stand out.
Right, and it does, and individualism, has its own benefits, right, and its own strengths. But you're right, when you do encounter, sort of this Japanese way of doing things, you start to realize, that there's something else, and you realize, you start to see its value, and you start to think, wow, and part of you wants to incorporate some of that in your everyday life, right?
Yeah.
And you see the value. Yeah, for sure. So, I always, to this day, I still, like, when I get on an escalator, I stand all the way to the right, like say I'm at the airport, pull my baggage over, and I leave enough room for somebody to go up the left if they need to. And, sometimes, I see most Americans don't do that, right?
Yep.
And sometimes it bugs me, like it bugs Japanese people, but, whatever. So, but, there are still things, like when I park a car, I think about, am I enough to the left? Am I enough to the right? So the other people can park, and it just over time, being in Japanese culture, it just kind of teaches you to start thinking about those things. Do I do this perfectly? No. And I'm still, very Western but it did impact me, it did affect me. And it, like I said, there's that moment of surrender where you realize, now I need to do things a different way. And it really does, things start to change after that. They don't become perfect, but you start to make progress. Wayne would said this, once you learn to start doing things the Japanese way, your sumo goes up very quickly. Your skill just really shoots up. And I believe that. I truly believe that. And, I would say for Westerners living in Japan, when you learn to stop doing things the way you do them, you start surrendering some of that, then your ability to survive and to do well and to thrive in Japanese culture goes up dramatically and quickly. So,
well, I just want to tell you that, there's so many wonderful photographs in your book, but the standout for me was the photo of Wayne putting the mawashi on his granddaughter.
Yes.
I love that photo. It just encapsulates everything that particularly John Jacks talks about.
Yes.
In sumo. It's you can just see the love and care on his face and the young girl. I mean, I just love everything about it. I can't stop looking at it. It's so great.
Yeah, and I specifically included those of his grandkids in the book. We wound up, doing the adults, and then the kids came out and we started taking photos. And as I looked through them later, I was like, I've got to include those in the book. They're just beautiful. And I think if this is where you're going, this is the future of sumo, right? Yeah. Is starting early, starting young, and, teaching not just the sport, but, these other aspects we just talked about, these sort of social and cultural sort of aspects as well. So, but yeah, those are just beautiful photos. And, I'm hoping that as sumo progresses in the United States, on the mainland or Hawaii or wherever in our country, that you start seeing the younger and younger kids getting involved, and, people start early. So,
yeah,
like I said, I really hope, people, take a look at the book. I hope it's valuable to them. I hope that, people who pick up this book, they learn a little bit about these other aspects of sumo, these other aspects of Japanese culture, but also that the book, my idea is that some of these people, when they're in their 50s and 60s, and they're looking back and they have kids and grandkids, that this book will be something they can show and say, yeah, this is what I did back, at that time. And hopefully sumo will be even bigger.
Beautiful. Me too. Well, thanks for giving me some of your time. Thanks for making the book. Thank you for taking the photographs and for doing these interviews. Anything that captures the experience of these men, when they were in Japan studying sumo, I feel like is so critical for us to hold on to.
I do too.
So thank you very much to David Rios. Buy that book. Support a writer writing about the sport you love and photographer. All right, then, I guess until next week.
Yep. See you then.
I am Laurie.
Are you?
No.
I guess I would be Leslie then if you're me.
Shows you where my brain is today.
Okay. Oops, we did it again.
Bye.
Bye.